The galaxy had always whispered stories about the Zarnak. They were a race of hunters, conquerors who moved from planet to planet like a storm, leaving nothing but ash in their wake. No one stood against them. No one even tried. Their ships were massive, dark shapes that blotted out stars as they passed, and their weapons could tear through entire cities in seconds. Fear was their weapon, and it worked, until they came to Earth. It started with a flash in the sky. People looked up, thinking it was just another satellite, or maybe a meteor shower. But then the ships descended, hundreds of them, covering the horizon like a swarm of locusts. The air crackled with energy, and the ground shook as beams of light rained down, obliterating buildings and turning streets into craters. Panic spread faster than the destruction itself. Cars screeched to a halt on highways. People ran screaming through the streets, and governments scrambled to respond. But no one knew what to do. Amid the chaos, two figures stood apart. Daniel Carter, a man in his mid-30s with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor, watched the scene unfold from the rooftop of an abandoned office building. He wasn't running. He wasn't panicking. Instead, he was thinking. A former military strategist, Daniel had spent years planning for disasters, though none quite like this. Beside him stood Laura Bennett, a scientist whose work on alien communication had once been dismissed as science fiction. She clutched a small device in her hand, a prototype translator she'd been working on for years. It wasn't finished, but now it might be humanity's only chance. "They're not here to negotiate," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the explosions echoing in the distance. "They've done this before. They'll hit hard, take what they want, and leave." Laura nodded, her fingers tightening around the device. "Then we need to figure out what they want, and how to stop them." The first wave of attacks targeted major cities: New York, Tokyo, London, all reduced to rubble within hours. But the Zarnak didn't stop there. Smaller ships descended into rural areas, scanning for resources, capturing survivors, and destroying anything that resisted. It was clear they saw humans as little more than pests to be exterminated. Daniel and Laura knew they couldn't fight alone. They needed help, and fast. Using old radio frequencies and encrypted messages, they reached out to anyone still alive. Slowly, responses trickled in, from soldiers hiding in bunkers, engineers holed up in workshops, and ordinary people determined to survive. One by one, they gathered in the ruins of Chicago, where underground tunnels offered some protection from the invaders. Among the survivors was Ethan Cole, a wiry man with grease-stained hands and a knack for fixing things. He brought sketches of weapons he'd designed using scraps from destroyed vehicles. "If we can't match their tech," he said, holding up a crude blueprint, "we'll have to outsmart them." Then there was Samantha Riley, a pilot who'd lost her squadron during the initial attack. Her face was pale, her eyes haunted, but her voice carried determination. "I can fly anything," she told Daniel. "Even their ships, if you can get me close enough." As days turned into weeks, the group began to organize. They set up makeshift shelters, scavenged supplies, and trained fighters. Morale was low, but hope flickered in small moments. A child laughing despite the horror. A successful raid on a Zarnak supply depot. A shared meal made from canned goods found in the wreckage. But above all, it was Daniel and Laura who kept everyone going. Daniel's plans gave them direction, while Laura's quiet optimism reminded them why they were fighting. Late at night, when the others slept, she would sit by candlelight, tinkering with her translator. She knew time was running out. If they couldn't find a way to communicate with the Zarnak, or at least understand them, they wouldn't stand a chance. And so, beneath the shadow of alien domination, humanity began to rise. Not with grand armies or advanced technology, but with grit, ingenuity, and sheer willpower. The Zarnak had feared nothing before. But as Daniel often reminded the group, fear isn't something you're born with, it's something you earn. And humanity was ready to make the Zarnak pay. The Zarnak didn't waste time. After the initial wave of destruction, They sent envoys to Earth's remaining strongholds, demanding surrender. Their ships hovered menacingly over cities, broadcasting a single message in broken, distorted voices: submit, survive. The message was simple, but its meaning was clear. Resistance would be met with total annihilation. In Chicago, Daniel Carter and Laura Bennett listened to the transmission in silence. Around them, survivors gathered, their faces pale and tense. Some wanted to give up, believing it was the only way to save what little remained of humanity. Others argued that surrender meant slavery, or worse. The room buzzed with fear and uncertainty, but Daniel's voice cut through the noise like a knife. "They're testing us," he said, his tone firm. "They've seen how other species crumble under pressure. They expect us to do the same." Laura nodded, stepping forward. She held up her translator device, still incomplete but showing signs of progress. "If we can understand them, maybe we can find a weakness. Maybe we can fight back." The group fell silent as Laura spoke. Her calm confidence inspired hope, even in the darkest moments. But not everyone shared her optimism. Ethan Cole, the engineer, shook his head. "Even if we figure out what they're saying, how does that help us? We're outnumbered, outgunned, and buried underground. What chance do we really have?" "We have something they don't," Laura replied, her voice steady. "We have each other, and we have something to lose." Her words struck a chord. Slowly, people began to nod. Samantha Riley, the pilot, stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. "I'm not giving up," she said, "not without a fight." The decision was made. When the Zarnak envoy arrived, a towering creature with armored skin and glowing eyes, they were met not with pleas for mercy, but defiance. Laura stood at the front of the group, clutching her translator. Behind her, Daniel, Sam, and the others formed a wall of determination. The envoy scanned them with cold, calculating eyes, then spoke in its guttural language. Laura activated her device. Static crackled, and fragments of the alien's words appeared on the screen. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. "You will surrender," the translation read. "Resistance is futile." Laura took a deep breath and stepped closer. "No," she said, her voice loud and clear. "You've underestimated us." The envoy tilted its head, as if puzzled by her response. Then it raised a clawed hand, pointing at her. "Defiance will result in extermination." Daniel moved quickly, stepping between Laura and the creature. "If you want us," he said, his voice low and steady, "you'll have to take us." For a moment, no one moved. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, with a dismissive snarl, the envoy turned and left, its heavy footsteps echoing as it returned to its ship. The humans watched it go, their hearts pounding. "That was insane," Ethan muttered once the creature was gone. "What if it had attacked right there?" "It didn't," Daniel replied. "Because it doesn't see us as a real threat. Not yet." Laura glanced down at her translator, her mind racing. The encounter had given her more data, enough to refine the device further. If she could decode more of the Zarnak's language, she might uncover clues about their technology, their tactics, or even their weaknesses. But time was running out. The Zarnak wouldn't wait forever. As the group dispersed, Sam pulled Daniel aside. "Do you think we can actually win this?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. Daniel looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Winning isn't about being stronger or faster," he said. "It's about being smarter. And I think we're smart enough to surprise them." Sam nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. Still, she couldn't deny the spark of hope growing within her. The Zarnak had never faced an enemy like humanity before, an enemy willing to fight not just for survival, but for something greater. For home. For freedom. That night, Laura worked late, hunched over her translator. The faint hum of machinery filled the air as she pieced together fragments of alien speech. Outside, the ruins of Chicago lay silent under the stars. Somewhere in the distance, a Zarnak ship loomed, its shadow stretching across the city like a predator waiting to strike. But beneath the surface, humanity stirred. Plans were forming, alliances strengthening, and courage building. The Zarnak had brought war to Earth, but they had also awakened something they couldn't comprehend. Something fierce, something unyielding, something human. The resistance grew stronger with each passing day. Hidden beneath the ruins of Chicago, the survivors worked tirelessly to prepare for the fight ahead. Ethan Cole spent hours in a dimly lit workshop, surrounded by scraps of metal and wires. His hands moved quickly, assembling crude but effective weapons from whatever he could find. Pieces of destroyed cars, old pipes, and even parts salvaged from downed Zarnak drones. "We can't match their tech," he muttered to himself as he welded two pieces of metal together. "But we don't need to. We just need to hit them where it hurts." Nearby, Samantha Riley trained new recruits in an underground garage turned makeshift hangar. She stood in front of a group of nervous volunteers, her voice firm but encouraging. "Flying isn't about skill alone," she told them, pacing back and forth. "It's about knowing your enemy and yourself." Behind her, a captured Zarnak drone sat on a platform, its sleek design glinting under flickering fluorescent lights. Sam had spent days studying it, learning its controls and limitations. Now she was teaching others how to use it against the invaders. Daniel Carter coordinated everything from a small command center carved out of an old subway tunnel. Maps covered the walls, marked with red pins showing Zarnak positions and green ones indicating human strongholds. He pored over the maps late into the night, planning attacks and strategizing defenses. Laura Bennett often joined him, bringing updates from her work on the translator. The device was improving, slowly decoding more of the Zarnak language. Each new fragment gave them insight into their enemy's tactics and weaknesses. Despite their progress, morale remained fragile. Supplies were running low, and a constant threat of discovery loomed over them. One evening, as the group gathered for a rare meal of canned beans and stale bread, tension boiled over. A young man named Kyle, barely out of his teens, slammed his fist on the table. "This is useless," he shouted, his face flushed with frustration. "We're just delaying the inevitable. They'll find us, and when they do, we're all dead." The room fell silent. Everyone looked at Daniel, waiting for his response. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You're right," he said calmly. "If we sit here and do nothing, they'll win. But if we fight, if we make every shot count, every move matter, we stand a chance." Laura nodded, adding softly, "Every piece of information we gather, every weapon we build, brings us closer to turning this around. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who couldn't." Her words struck a chord. Slowly, the tension eased, replaced by quiet determination. Even Kyle lowered his head, ashamed of his outburst, but inspired by the resolve around him. As the days passed, the resistance launched small raids to test their strength. Sam led a team of pilots in a daring attack on a Zarnak supply convoy. Using stolen drones, they lured the enemy into a trap, then struck quickly before retreating into the shadows. It wasn't a major victory, but it proved they could strike back effectively. Back at base, cheers erupted as the fighters returned, their mission a success. Meanwhile, Laura made another breakthrough with the translator. She discovered that the Zarnak communicated using patterns of sound and light, not just words. By mimicking these patterns, she believed they could create decoys or even disrupt their systems. Excited, she shared her findings with Daniel, who immediately began incorporating them into his plans. But the Zarnak weren't idle. Patrols grew more frequent, their ships sweeping the skies and scanning the ground below. The resistance knew it was only a matter of time before the aliens found them. Yet instead of fear, a strange sense of calm settled over the group. They had prepared as best they could. They had fought back, and they had proven, to themselves, if no one else, that humanity wouldn't go quietly into the night. In the darkness of the tunnels, beneath the weight of alien oppression, hope burned brighter than ever. The Zarnak had brought war to Earth, but they had awakened something unexpected, a spirit of defiance that refused to be extinguished. The first major battle came sooner than anyone expected. It happened over the Pacific Ocean, far from the ruins of Chicago, but close enough to shake the resistance to its core. Samantha Riley stood on the edge of the makeshift runway, her heart pounding as she gave final instructions to her team. "Stick to the plan," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves twisting in her stomach. "Hit hard, hit fast, and get out before they can regroup." Behind her, a line of captured Zarnak drones waited, their sleek shapes glinting under the pale morning light. Each one had been modified by Ethan Cole, fitted with human-made explosives and remote controls. Sam's squadron consisted of 6 pilots, all volunteers who knew the risks but were willing to take them. Among them was Kyle, the young man who had once doubted the resistance. He now wore a determined expression, his hands gripping the controls of his drone tightly. As the sun rose higher, the signal came. A Zarnak fleet was approaching, carrying supplies critical to their operations. Daniel Carter's strategy was clear: cut off their resources, and the invaders would weaken. The squadron launched into the sky, their drones blending seamlessly with the enemy ships. For a while, everything went according to plan. The drones slipped past the outer defenses, moving silently toward the larger cruiser at the center of the formation. Then chaos erupted. One of the pilots panicked during the attack run, veering too close to a Zarnak fighter. Alarms blared across the alien fleet, and within seconds, the humans were surrounded. Laser fire filled the air, lighting up the sky like a deadly fireworks display. Sam's voice crackled over the comms, sharp and urgent. "Break formation. Everyone scatter." Kyle froze for a moment, staring at the swarm of Zarnak ships closing in around him. His drone jerked as a blast grazed its side, nearly knocking him off course. "Keep moving," Sam shouted, her voice cutting through his panic. "You're not alone. We've got you." With gritted teeth, Kyle regained control, weaving his drone through the chaos. Together, the squadron unleashed their payloads, targeting the cruiser's engines and weapon systems. Explosions rocked the massive ship, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. But victory came at a cost. 2 drones were shot down, their pilots lost in the inferno. Another 3 barely made it back, limping home with heavy damage. When the remaining fighters returned to base, silence greeted them. The group gathered in the hangar, their faces grim as they counted the losses. Sam stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. "We did what we set out to do," she said, looking at the battered survivors. "That cruiser is gone, and the Zarnak will feel it." But her voice trailed off, and she bowed her head, unable to finish. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking for her. "Today we showed them that we're not just prey. We're hunters too. But every hunt has its price." His gaze swept over the room, meeting the eyes of each person there. "We honor those we lost by continuing the fight. That's how we win." Laura Bennett sat quietly in a corner, holding her translator device close. She couldn't help feeling responsible. Had she decoded more of the Zarnak language faster, maybe they could have avoided this bloodshed. But guilt wouldn't bring anyone back. Instead, she focused on the data collected during the battle. Analyzing fragments of intercepted communications, every piece of information brought them closer to understanding their enemy and finding a way to end the war. In the days that followed, the resistance mourned their fallen comrades. Candles flickered in the tunnels, casting soft light on makeshift memorials. Yet amid the grief, a new resolve took root. The Zarnak had always seen humanity as weak, as insignificant. But now, they had tasted defeat. And though the cost had been high, the message was clear. Humanity would not surrender, not without a fight. Outside, the skies remained dark with alien ships. But beneath the surface, hope burned brighter than ever. The resistance had struck a blow, and they would strike again. Laura Bennett sat hunched over her translator late one night, her fingers flying across the keys as lines of alien code scrolled across the screen. The device hummed softly, its lights casting a faint glow on her tired face. She had spent hours analyzing fragments of Zarnak communication, piecing together bits of their language like a puzzle. Tonight, something clicked. A pattern emerged, a recurring phrase that hinted at more than just military orders. "They're running out of time," she whispered to herself, her heart racing. The words on the screen suggested urgency, desperation even. It wasn't about conquering Earth anymore. It was about survival. Laura's mind raced as she connected the dots. The Zarnak weren't invincible. Their homeworld was dying. Ecological collapse, resource shortages, and internal strife were tearing them apart. That was why they had come to Earth, not just for conquest, but for salvation. Excited, Laura rushed to Daniel Carter, who was poring over maps in the command center. "I think I found something big," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. She explained her discovery, showing him the decoded messages. At first, Daniel frowned, skeptical. But as he listened, his expression shifted from doubt to determination. If their homeworld is collapsing, then their entire empire is on shaky ground, he said slowly. This could be our chance to hit them where it hurts, not just here, but everywhere. The idea was bold, almost reckless. They couldn't attack the Zarnak homeworld directly. It was too far away, too heavily defended. But they could target their supply chains, the lifelines keeping their forces alive. Every resource extraction site, every transport ship, every storage facility became a potential weak point. If they could disrupt enough of these operations, they might force the Zarno to retreat, or even collapse entirely. Daniel called a meeting to share the plan. The room buzzed with cautious optimism as he laid it out. "We've shown we can fight back," he said, his voice steady. "Now it's time to take the fight to them. We'll hit their resource hubs, one after another. Make them bleed until they can't afford to stay." Ethan Cole nodded eagerly, already sketching ideas for new weapons. "If we focus on sabotage, we won't need to engage them head-on," he said. "Explosives, traps, anything to cripple their operations." Sam Riley raised a hand, her brow furrowed. "These targets won't be easy to reach," she said. "They'll be guarded, probably in hostile territory. Are we ready for that?" "We have to be," Daniel replied. "This isn't just about winning battles. It's about ending the war." The group began preparing immediately. Supplies were gathered, weapons tested, and volunteers trained. Laura worked tirelessly to refine her translator, using it to predict Zarnak movements and identify vulnerable sites. Her efforts paid off when she uncovered intel about a key mining outpost on Mars, a massive operation extracting rare minerals vital to the Zarnak war machine. "This is it," Daniel said, pointing to the location on a holographic map. "If we can take this place out, we cut off a major artery of their supply chain." But infiltrating Mars wouldn't be easy. The outpost was deep behind enemy lines, surrounded by patrols and automated defenses. Sam stepped forward, her jaw set. "I'll lead the team," she said firmly. "We'll get in, plant the explosives, and get out before they know what hit them." Daniel hesitated, knowing the risks. But Sam's confidence was unshakable. "We've done the impossible before," she reminded him. "We can do it again." As the mission details came together, a quiet resolve settled over the group. They knew the stakes. Their next move would either turn the tide or cost them everything. Yet despite the danger, there was no hesitation. The Zarnak had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make the same mistake twice. In the shadows of the tunnels, beneath the weight of an alien occupation, hope burned brighter than ever. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to reclaim their future. And with each step forward, they proved that even the fiercest predators could bleed. The mission to Mars was as dangerous as it sounded. Samantha Riley led a small team of 6, each member chosen for their skills and determination. They wore stolen Zarnak armor, its heavy plates uncomfortable but effective at blending in with the enemy. Beneath the helmets, Their faces were tense, their breathing steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. Sam's voice crackled over the comms, low and firm. "Remember the plan. Stick together, stay quiet, and don't do anything stupid." The journey to the mining outpost was nerve-wracking. Their ship, a captured Zarnok transport, approached the red planet under the cover of darkness. The outpost loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of metal towers and glowing conduits carved into the Martian surface. Automated drones patrolled the perimeter, their sensors scanning for intruders. Sam's grip tightened on the controls as they descended, her knuckles white. "This is where it gets tricky," she muttered. Once on the ground, the team moved quickly, slipping through gaps in the patrols. Ethan Cole had modified their armor to mimic Zarnok energy signatures, fooling most of the scanners, but the deception wouldn't last forever. Every step brought them closer to discovery. Inside the facility, the air was thick with heat and the hum of machinery. Workers, both Zarnok and enslaved humans, moved about, their movements mechanical, exhausted. Sam's stomach churned at the sight, but she forced herself to focus. They weren't here to rescue anyone, not yet. The explosives were carefully planted along key points: power cores, fuel lines, and data hubs. Kyle, still haunted by his earlier doubts, worked silently but efficiently, his hand steady as he set the charges. "Almost done," he whispered, his voice barely audible even over the comms. Sam nodded, keeping watch while the others finished their tasks. Then, disaster struck. As they moved toward the final target, Kyle tripped an invisible security beam. Alarms blared instantly, red lights flashing across the facility. "Move," Sam shouted, her voice sharp. The team sprinted down the corridor, dodging bursts of laser fire from automated turrets that activated around them. Daniel's voice crackled in their ears. "You've got incoming reinforcements. Get out now." "Not without finishing the job," Sam shot back. She knew they couldn't leave without setting off the explosives. They'd come too far to fail. With seconds ticking away, Kyle planted the last charge, his hands shaking but precise. "Done," he yelled. The escape was chaos. Laser blasts lit up the narrow hallways as the team ran, their boots pounding against the metal floor. Sam took point, firing back at the pursuing drones with a stolen weapon. Behind her, Kyle stumbled, his leg grazed by a blast. One of the others grabbed him, pulling him along. "Keep moving," Sam ordered, her voice cutting through the panic. They reached the extraction point just as the first explosion rocked the facility. Flames erupted behind them, consuming the outpost in a fiery inferno. Sam didn't look back. She shoved her team onto the waiting ship, her heart pounding as the engines roared to life. Enemy fighters closed in, their weapons trained on the fleeing transport. Sam gripped the controls, weaving through the barrage of fire. "Hold on," she shouted, pushing the ship to its limits. Finally, they broke free, the Martian horizon shrinking behind them. The team sat in silence, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Kyle slumped against the wall, clutching his injured leg, but alive. Sam exhaled slowly, her hands trembling on the controls. They had done it. Against all odds, they had succeeded. Back on Earth, Daniel listened to the report with a mixture of relief and pride. The mining outpost was gone, a major blow to the Zarnok supply chain. Laura smiled faintly, her translator humming softly beside her. The resistance had struck another blow. And this time, the Zarnok would feel it deeply. In the shadows of the tunnels, hope burned brighter than ever. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. Back on Earth, the mood was tense but hopeful. The destruction of the Martian mining outpost had sent shockwaves through the Zarnok forces. Reports trickled in from resistance cells around the globe. Enemy patrols were less frequent, supply lines disrupted, and morale among the invaders seemed to falter. For the first time, humanity dared to believe they could win. But not everyone shared this optimism. Whispers of betrayal began to spread within the Chicago base. Supplies went missing, Messages were intercepted, and strange movements were spotted near their hidden entrances. At first, Daniel Carter dismissed it as paranoia, a natural reaction to living under constant threat. But when a planned raid on a Zarnak depot failed catastrophically, leaving half the team dead, he knew something was wrong. Laura Bennett noticed it too. Her translator picked up fragments of encrypted Zarnak communications that hinted at inside information being leaked. Someone was feeding the enemy details about their operations. She approached Daniel with her findings, her face pale. "It's not just bad luck," she said quietly. "They know what we're doing before we do it." The group gathered in the command center, the air thick with suspicion. Accusations flew back and forth until all eyes turned to Ryan Mitchell, a charismatic recruiter who had joined the resistance months earlier. Ryan had been instrumental in bringing new fighters into the fold, his charm and confidence winning over even the most hesitant survivors. But now, those same qualities made him a suspect. Daniel confronted him directly. "We've got evidence," he said, his voice firm. "Someone's talking to the Zarnak. If you know anything, now's the time to speak up." Ryan hesitated, his usual bravado faltering. Finally, he sighed and looked down. "I didn't have a choice," he admitted, his voice trembling. "They took my family during one of their raids. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd kill them." A heavy silence fell over the room. Anger simmered beneath the surface, but Daniel held up a hand, silencing the murmurs. "You put us all at risk," he said, his tone sharp but controlled. "How much did you tell them?" "Only what I thought wouldn't matter," Ryan replied quickly, desperation creeping into his voice. "Supply drops, patrol routes, nothing critical. I swear." Laura stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "If they used his family to force him, then they might still be alive," she said softly. "If we can find them." Daniel nodded slowly. Betrayal was unforgivable, but Ryan wasn't entirely to blame. The Zarnak had exploited his love for his family, turning it into a weapon against him. "You're confined to quarters until we figure this out," Daniel told Ryan, his voice hard but not cruel. "And if your family is alive, we'll do everything we can to bring them back." Sam Riley volunteered to lead a small team to investigate. Using Laura's decoded intel, they tracked the location of a Zarnak prison camp where Ryan's family might be held. The mission was risky, but Sam saw it as a chance to turn the situation around. "If we save them, maybe we can make things right," she said. "And if we don't," she trailed off, her meaning clear. As the team prepared to leave, Daniel addressed the rest of the group. "This isn't just about Ryan or his family," he said firmly. "It's about trust. We can't fight the Zarnak if we're tearing ourselves apart. From now on, everyone gets checked. No exceptions." The decision left a bitter taste, but it was necessary. Humanity's survival depended on unity and vigilance. In the shadows of the tunnels, the resistance tightened its ranks, guarding against both external enemies and internal threats. The Zarnak had tried to divide them, but instead, they grew stronger. Together, they vowed to protect each other and to keep fighting, no matter the cost. The rescue mission for Ryan Mitchell's family was fraught with danger from the start. Samantha Riley led a small team of 4, including Ethan Cole, who had rigged their gear with stealth-enhancing modifications. They moved under the cover of darkness, slipping through enemy patrols toward the Zarnak prison camp, located deep in the Appalachian Mountains. The air was cold and damp, and every sound, the crunch of leaves, the distant hum of alien ships, kept them on edge. Laura Bennett's intel had pinpointed the location of the camp, but it didn't prepare them for what they found. The facility was surrounded by high walls topped with glowing energy barriers. Automated drones patrolled the perimeter, their red eyes scanning for movement. Inside, rows of makeshift cells held humans captured during raids. Men, women, and children, all thin and weary, their faces hollow with despair. Among them, Sam hoped, were Ryan's wife and 2 young children. "We've got one shot at this," Sam whispered as they crouched behind a cluster of rocks. "If we're spotted, we won't make it out." Ethan nodded, adjusting the controls on his wrist device. "I can disable the barrier for about 30 seconds. That's all you'll have to get in and grab them." Sam took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "Let's do it." Ethan activated the device, sending out a pulse that momentarily disrupted the energy field. The team sprinted forward, staying low to avoid detection. Sam led the way, her weapon drawn but unused. They couldn't risk drawing attention. Inside the compound, chaos reigned. Prisoners huddled together, their eyes wide with fear as the team moved quickly among them. "Ryan Mitchell." Sam called softly, scanning the faces. "Is anyone here with him?" A frail woman stepped forward, clutching two frightened children close to her side. "I'm Emily," she said, her voice trembling. "We're his family." Sam exhaled in relief. "You're coming with us. Stay close." They retraced their steps, moving as fast as they could without alerting the guards. But just as they reached the outer wall, alarms blared. One of the prisoners, desperate to escape, had triggered a security sensor. Within moments, drones descended, their weapons trained on the intruders. "Run," Sam shouted, shoving Emily and the children ahead of her. Ethan fired back, disabling one drone before ducking behind cover. Laser blasts lit up the night, forcing them to zigzag toward safety. It was a brutal sprint to the extraction point, where their transport waited hidden in the woods. Ethan stayed behind to cover their retreat, his hand steady despite the chaos around him. When he finally caught up, his face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but alive. "Had to improvise a little," he said with a grim smile, holding up a damaged drone component. "Figured Laura might like to study this." Back at base, the reunion between Ryan and his family was bittersweet. Emily hugged her husband tightly, tears streaming down her face, while the children clung to both parents. For a moment, the weight of the war seemed to lift, replaced by the simple joy of being together again. But Daniel Carter reminded everyone that the fight wasn't over. "This proves something important," he said, addressing the group. "Even when they try to break us, we find a way to stand back up. We protect our own, no matter the cost." Laura worked tirelessly to analyze the drone part Ethan had salvaged, uncovering new insights into Zarnak technology. Each discovery brought them closer to turning the tide. The resistance grew stronger, its members united not just by survival, but by hope, for themselves, for their families, and for humanity's future. In the shadows of the tunnels, beneath the looming threat of the Zarnak, humanity continued to fight. Not because they had to, but because they refused to give up. And with each victory, no matter how small, they proved that even the fiercest predators could be challenged. The Zarnak were growing desperate. Their supply lines had been crippled, their mining operations sabotaged, and their forces stretched thin. Humanity's relentless resistance had forced them into a corner, and now they prepared for one final, crushing assault. Kroth, the Zarnak commander, was furious. His glowing eyes narrowed as he studied holographic projections of Earth's last stronghold, a fortress buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. "This ends now," he growled, his voice low and guttural. "No more delays. No more failures." Back at the Resistance base, Daniel Carter pieced together fragments of intercepted communications. Laura Bennett's translator had decoded enough to reveal the Zarnak's plan. An all-out attack on the Rocky Mountain stronghold. It would be the largest assault yet, with hundreds of ships descending to obliterate what remained of humanity's leadership. The stakes couldn't be higher. "They're coming for us," Daniel said, addressing the group gathered in the command center. "And they're bringing everything they've got." Fear rippled through the room, but it was quickly replaced by determination. Samantha Riley stepped forward, her jaw set. "Then we'll be ready for them," she said firmly. "We've fought them before, and we'll fight them again." Preparations began immediately. Ethan Cole worked around the clock, building traps and fortifying defenses. He rigged explosives along the mountain passes, designed to collapse tunnels and block enemy advances. Laura stayed glued to her translator, monitoring Zarnok movements and feeding real-time updates to Daniel. Every piece of information mattered, every second counted. As the days passed, the stronghold buzzed with activity. Fighters trained tirelessly, running drills and practicing maneuvers. Civilians helped wherever they could, hauling supplies, tending to the wounded, and preparing makeshift shelters. Even Ryan Mitchell, still burdened by guilt over his betrayal, pitched in, determined to make amends. "I owe you all my life," he told Daniel one evening. "If this is where I can repay that debt, then so be it." Finally, the day arrived. The sky above the mountains darkened as Zarnok ships descended like a swarm of locusts. Their weapons lit up the horizon, blasting apart the outer defenses and shaking the ground beneath the stronghold. Inside, the resistance braced for impact. Sam led a squadron of pilots into the air, flying stolen drones and modified fighters. "Hit them hard," she shouted over the comms. "Take out as many as you can." Daniel coordinated the ground defense, positioning snipers on cliffs and organizing ambushes in the narrow valleys below. Explosions rocked the battlefield as Ethan's traps detonated, sending boulders tumbling down onto enemy forces. The resistance fought with everything they had: crude weapons, stolen tech, and sheer willpower. Despite their efforts, the Zarnok pushed forward, their numbers overwhelming. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. Morale wavered as casualties mounted. But then, something shifted. Laura noticed a pattern in the Zarnok fleet's movements, a vulnerability in their formation. She relayed the information to Daniel, who quickly devised a plan. "Sam, listen carefully," Daniel said over the comms. "There's a gap in their line. If you can break through it, you might be able to target their flagship directly." Sam hesitated for only a moment before responding. "Understood. I'm going in." Flying a prototype fighter jet armed with experimental plasma cannons, Sam pushed the limits of the craft, weaving through enemy fire with precision. Her heart pounded as she approached the flagship, its massive shape looming ahead like a predator ready to strike. With a deep breath, she locked onto the target and fired. The blast struck true, piercing the ship's hull and sending it spiraling toward the ground. Croft's death sent shockwaves through the Zarnok forces. Confusion spread as their leader fell, and their attacks became disorganized. Seizing the opportunity, the resistance launched a counteroffensive, driving the invaders back. When the dust settled, silence fell over the battlefield. Exhausted but alive, the survivors emerged from the tunnels, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. They had won, at great cost, but they had won. In the shadows of the mountains, hope burned brighter than ever. Humanity had proven itself stronger than fear, stronger than despair. And though the war wasn't over, they knew they could endure, because together, they were unstoppable. The victory at the Rocky Mountain stronghold was a turning point, but it wasn't the end. The Zarnok fleet retreated into space, their forces battered and leaderless. Croft's death had shattered their chain of command, leaving them in disarray. Yet no one in the resistance celebrated. Not yet. They knew the Zarnok wouldn't give up so easily. The invaders had one last card to play, and humanity had to be ready. Laura Bennett worked tirelessly to decode more of the Zarnok communications. Her translator hummed softly as lines of alien text scrolled across its screen. One phrase kept appearing, a set of coordinates far beyond Earth's orbit. At first, she thought it might be another supply hub or a hidden base, but as she pieced together the context, her eyes widened. "It's their homeworld," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're calling for reinforcements." Daniel Carter studied the data, his jaw tightening. "If they bring in fresh forces, we'll lose everything we fought for," he said grimly. "We can't let that happen." A plan began to form. One final, desperate gamble. If they could strike at the Zarnok homeworld itself, they might cripple their ability to wage war. It was risky, nearly impossible, But Daniel knew they had no other choice. He gathered the group in the command center, laying out the mission. We hit their homeworld, destroy their central command, and cut off their reinforcements, he said, his voice steady despite the enormity of the task. If we succeed, we end this war. Sam Riley stepped forward, her expression resolute. I'll lead the attack, she said without hesitation. We've beaten them before. We can do it again. Ethan Cole nodded, already sketching designs for modified ships capable of making the journey. I'll retrofit every fighter we have, he promised. We'll make sure they're armed to the teeth. The days that followed were a blur of preparation. Every available hand worked around the clock, repairing ships, building weapons, and training pilots. Laura stayed by her translator, refining it further to intercept any warnings the Zarnak might send. Even Ryan Mitchell volunteered, determined to prove his loyalty. I may not be a soldier, he said, but I can help however you need. Finally, the day came. A small fleet of human ships, cobbled together from scraps and stolen tech, launched into space. Sam led the charge, her prototype fighter at the front. Behind her flew Daniel, Ethan, and dozens of others, each carrying the weight of humanity's survival on their shoulders. As they approached the Zarnak homeworld, the scale of the challenge became clear. Massive orbital defenses guarded the planet, their cannons glowing ominously. Enemy ships swarmed like insects, ready to defend their dying world. But the humans didn't falter. Using Laura's intel, they identified weak points in the defenses and struck with precision. Sam targeted the central command tower, weaving through enemy fire with unmatched skill. Her ship shuddered under the barrage, but she pressed on, her focus unshakable. With a final blast, the tower collapsed, sending shockwaves through the atmosphere below. Back on Earth, survivors watched the skies, holding their breath. When news of the victory reached them, cheers erupted, a sound of triumph long denied. The Zarnak fleet dissolved into chaos, their empire crumbling without leadership. In the aftermath, the resistance stood united, battered but unbowed. Humanity had faced extinction and refused to yield. Together, they had proven that courage and determination could overcome even the fiercest predators. As the stars twinkled above, Daniel looked out over the ruins of Earth, his heart heavy but hopeful. This isn't the end, he said quietly. It's just the beginning. And for the first time in years, peace felt within reach.